Can you hear me? Excellent. All right. Welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed a good lunch. They're ready to hunker down for the afternoon. My name is Katie Tans, and I'm really excited to be introducing the next three sets of speakers today. I, too, am a paddler. In the summers, I guide canoe trips at Keewaydin, a canoe tripping camp based out of Lake Temagami. And in the off-season, I'm working as a teacher, also in outdoor education and guiding in the Toronto area. So first up, we have Rick Stronks. He is the chief naturalist at Algonquin Provincial Park. He's been coordinating the education programs there for 18 years. And he's informed me that one of his favorite parts of the job is howling for the wolves in the public wolf howl program. So without further ado, Rick Stronks.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be asked to speak here, and I'm actually very excited to actually have arrived. I drove from Huntsville this morning and thought I gave myself lots of time, which should have been about a 2.5-hour trip. Took us almost 5 hours, and we crossed 11 accidents on the way down here. So I'm happy to be here. You know, I have quite possibly the best job in the planet, working as the Chief Park Naturalist for Algonquin Park. Not only is it a wonderful park, and I'm sure many of you have done canoe trips there, and perhaps your very first canoe trip, like so many people in Ontario have done, but one of the things that's very remarkable about working at a place like Algonquin Park is that we have this amazing relationship with the research group. So we have, in any given year, there could be 50 or 60 research projects, and one of the ones that's been long-standing, and many of you may even know about it, is Dr. Marty Obard with the bear research that he's done, and I've had the privilege of going out with the bear researchers, and we have this really neat relationship where we can work with the researchers and we turn that latest science right back into our educational programs and into our programs that we do for the public. So the program that I want to do with you today is kind of a shortened version of a typical bear talk that we do. I am working at the Outdoor Adventure Show tomorrow. A little plug, if you want to see the full version, 45 minutes with video is tomorrow's program, but this is a shortened version. What I want to do with you is, there's really two parts to this talk. The first part, I want to talk a little bit about bear biology, because I firmly believe that in order for you to live or camp in bear country, it's essential that you have some background to understanding this animal. And the second part of the talk then really talks about what happens when bears and humans collide out in the wild, and what are some of the things that we can do to prevent this, and what are some of the things that we can do if we do encounter a bear. So that'll be the second part. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the animal itself, the black bear. We're only talking about black bears here, although there are polar bears in Ontario. That's on the far north. The primary bear that we have is the black bear. I'm already starting to think ahead about what they eat, berries. At some point, I usually say beer at this talk as well, but don't worry about that. So most people overestimate the size of black bears. You can see there, males typically 150 to 300 pounds, females 100 to 150 pounds. So in general terms, not that far off from humans. However, they do have the potential to get very large. The largest known black bear ever recorded in Algonquin Park was by the superintendent in the 1930s, and it weighed a whopping 702 pounds. So they do have the potential to get quite large. But typically when we see them, we think that they're a lot larger than they are. This is a complicated map. It's for the bear zones. Really the point of this is to show you the areas that have the highest density of black bears in Ontario, and that's going to be in that red and yellow here and this area here. So really this is the area of Ontario that has the highest density of black bears, and you're probably looking at that saying that's also probably where about 90% of the canoe routes are in Ontario, and I think you are correct. So I think it's very applicable, and I'm sure many of you have a lot of firsthand experience knowing that you are camping in black bear country. A big part of understanding a bear is understanding that for 5 months of the year, they hibernate. And this hibernation is tough. This is where they may lose 40% of their weight. So if they're going in at 150 pounds, they may be losing 60 pounds over the winter by using up those fat reserves. So the rest of the year, the 7 months that they have, they are driven by food. They need to get fat in order to survive the following winter. And that is the single most important thing to understand about black bears. They are absolutely driven by food, and they are smart and they are resourceful in trying to figure this out. At the beginning of the season, the food sources are actually pretty lousy. The bear primarily eats a lot of vegetation, poplar leaves, grasses, clovers, anything that's coming up. And a bear's digestive system is a lot like ours, and it's a very short system, and it's not very efficient. So when it's eating things like the grasses here, it's probably still losing weight. There's not a whole lot of nutritional value in the green material that it's eating. It is, however, very resourceful at finding certain food sources. So, for example, here's common white suckers. Suckers will move from large lakes like Opiongo up into streams in the spring for about a 10-day period. And black bears have learned that for this very short period, a week to 10 days, there's a tremendous food resource in these suckers. And many different bears from large areas will move over to that area and find those sucker streams. So they have this ability to learn a food resource, and they will also learn when food resources dry up or whatever. But they have that ability to figure out, and they pass that information on. There are a lot of other food sources, like things like moose and deer. And the truth is, black bears are pretty lousy predators. They are not very good at taking down an adult deer or moose, but calves or fawns are certainly very vulnerable. One of the reasons that moose will often swim out to an island or go to a peninsula to give birth is to get away from predators like wolves and bears. So for a short period of time, those are potential food items, the small moose calves. However, the primary food sources really start coming in the summer and the fall, and most of these are things that we kind of think of, with bears, associating with them with the fruits and nuts. So things like raspberries, blueberries, pin cherries, depending on where you are critical food sources. So it's in the summer that they're starting now to put on some weight. But by far, and especially in central Ontario, the two most important food crops that we have in Ontario are beech nuts and acorns, and both of those are fall crops. So the period of the fall is the primary. And beech nuts especially, and this is one that very concerns us because many of you probably know that beech trees are in serious decline in Ontario. This is a major food source for black bears. If beech trees die, which it certainly looks like every indication that they will die, that's going to be a major gap in the food for black bears. So although these nuts can be found on the ground, primarily they are up in the tops of trees, and black bears have an incredible ability to climb trees looking for food sources. This is a very important slide to remember, especially when we start talking about, if you do encounter a bear, what should you do? Should you climb a tree? I would suggest to you that most bears are better climbers than you are. They are remarkable. And then this is probably a 250-pound bear that's completely at ease up in a tree. And I do have some video footage that you could see tomorrow. To give you a sense of how important beech nuts are, we had a bear a few years ago that was a bit trap happy. It got into the traps numerous times. The first time this young female was caught was May 16th in 2006, and I'm going to use pounds. She weighed 90 pounds, so she was a young female, second-year-old. And 2 weeks later, caught her, and she was 94 pounds, so put on 4 pounds in 2 weeks. The next time we caught her was about a month later in July, and she weighed 109, so she put on about 15 pounds in 30 days, so half a pound a day. And the next time we caught her was when she was in her den, and at that point she weighed a whopping 220 pounds. Given that she was already in the den for a while, she probably crawled into the den at 250 pounds. She went from 100 pounds in the summer to 250 pounds. That was the year of one of the best beech nut crops we had ever seen. And she probably loaded up. There's an estimate that they can put on 2 pounds of fat a day by eating beech nuts. Incredibly important food resource. The other thing that was quite remarkable about her is that she gave birth to 4 cubs. 2 is normal, 3 is unusual, 4 is almost never heard of. So that, again, it's an indication of how healthy she was. The other interesting thing about black bear behavior is that the female will take her cubs. They're born in January. She spends the entire first year with those cubs. So she teaches them all the food sources all during the spring, the summer, the fall. They all crawl into the den together the second winter. They emerge the following spring, and when she mates again in June is when she kicks out those bears. 2 important parts of that story. First of all, she's teaching all those young bears where the food resources are. And the second thing that's really important is all these 2-year-old bears, which really consider them teenagers, all those teenagers are getting kicked out of the house at a 2-year-old, and those are often the bears that we hear about getting into trouble in towns and in campgrounds, because it's the first time they're kicked away, and they're still trying to figure out exactly how to go about making a living without mom being there. So, what happens when bears get habituated? Okay. I got a confession here. I have no idea where this picture came from. And I certainly hope there's not somebody out there who's worried about copyright and whatever, because somebody sent this to me. It probably was on the internet. I don't even know if it's real. I doubt it. But it makes the point, is that naturally, black bears are afraid of humans. And that's a really good thing. But they can become habituated. They can lose their fear of humans and start hanging around us in campgrounds, around our homes, when we're in the backcountry. So what do? Well, in campgrounds, one of the things that we've been experimenting with is something called negative conditioning. And the idea here is we're trying to give the bear a negative experience when he's behaving badly. So, for example, in a campground. So we might hit it with bear spray, we might hit it with rubber bullets or bean bags, but actually the method we've gone to more and more is just paintball guns. It gives it a nice little whack. It doesn't hurt it, and we can actually tell that we've already hit it once. And the idea is to give this a negative experience. We've had a little bit of success with it, but not a whole lot. The traditional method of dealing with a bear that has lost its fear and is in an area is that we capture it in a trap and we move it 100 kilometers away or whatever we can. And within a couple of days, it's usually right back again. About 50% of the bears that we would move like this are just right back again in a couple of days. And so it's not an ideal way to manage. Managing the bear behavior has not been very successful. So one of the things that we have been incredibly successful with over the years is managing the human behavior. And so we've come up with something that we call the 3 bear rules. And everybody should know this. Never feed or approach a bear. That's number 1. It seems pretty obvious. But it's surprising when you look back at some of the pictures that we have in our slide collection. This is actually from Banff National Park. It's an older picture. Here's one from Algonquin Park, probably, late 60s, early 70s, based on the cars. And this is great. There's a video camera here, and there's a child in the back seat there. I have heard stories of parents putting peanut butter on their kids' hands to get good pictures. So, unbelievable. Fortunately, we don't see this behavior anymore, but there are still people who think it's okay to feed wildlife. And there are some areas up in the Muskokas where we've had, the municipalities have had to put some stricter rules into it because there are people who think it's still okay to feed wildlife, including bears. The second bear rule is keep a clean campsite or home. Seems pretty obvious, but camping is actually a very messy business. And so bears are driven by their food. They have an incredible sense of smell. Our food tends to be fatty, and so if you leave this mess around on the table, they can smell it and they can be attracted to it. And even if you're not the one that's leaving it, you don't know who's left stuff before. And bears learn food sources, and so they may be on your site because somebody else was a messy camper. So it's very important to keep a clean campsite. We are becoming more and more serious about enforcing the rules of having a clean campsite. If you leave stuff around your campsite, you may get a sticker put on it, which basically says, if you don't clean it up, we can seize the item, or you could be fined or even kicked out. If you camp in national parks out in Western Canada and United States, they are a lot more serious about evicting people for bad behavior. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Park rangers caught a camper leaving his garbage lying around for the 3rd time. So they tranquilized him and relocated him back to the city. I think that's a really good idea. The third bear rule is store your food in a safe location. For you, as backcountry campers, this is probably your biggest nightmare. This is your biggest challenge of what do you do. If you're car camping, it's relatively easy. We say the trunk of your car is still one of the safest places. Some campgrounds are putting in bear lockers in order to put your food. But if you're in the backcountry, 3 meters off the ground, 2 meters away from a tree, because we know bears can climb trees. But here's the interesting thing. Our park rangers tell us some amazing stories about what bears have done in the backcountry. There have been bears that have figured out that if you snap this line, food falls from the heavens. There are other examples where bears have learned that portages are great locations for food, because if you're double tripping, you're leaving a pack at one side, and they have figured out that you can hang around a portage and get food. So it's quite remarkable. These are called food barrels, not bear-proof food barrels. Somebody learned the hard way by not putting this up in a tree. This is not bear-proof at all, and so bears can certainly rip across a little container like this. Here's a series of pictures that somebody sent me. Somebody wanted to feed birds during the summer, which isn't really recommended. The birds don't need it, and of course it can be an attractant for bears. But they thought, well, that's okay. I'll just hang it between two trees. That way the bears, even if they see and smell it, I mean, how could they possibly get to this, right? I mean, it's impossible for a bear to get... So good luck hanging your packs in the trees. Those are the three bear rules. You know, when I do this talk, I love to be able to say, let's end the talk right here, because I think they're amazing animals, and we'll just leave it at that. But really, what so many people really want to know in a bear program, what do you do if you do encounter a bear? And so I'm just going to close the talk here with talking a little bit about human-bear encounters. And as I said at the beginning, fortunately, bears are naturally afraid of humans. And that's a really, really good thing, because there's a lot of bears out there, and they are really powerful animals. The biggest thing that we talk about is stay calm and assess the situation. And it's easy to say, but it's not always easy to do. There are basically 4 types of encounters that you will likely see if you're out traveling. The first one is you might see a fleeing or curious bear. This is a bear that you're walking along a trail, and a bear's up ahead of you, and all of a sudden you just see the back end of it, and it's running away from you. You might be out in a blueberry field picking berries, and a bear looks up at you and then takes off. It's curious. There's really no danger of you. It's not interested in you as a food source. So your reaction, just enjoy it. You got to see a black bear, not a big deal. The second one are these bears that we call habituated or food conditions. This is the bear that's hanging around a campground. It might be hanging around your home. You might be in the backcountry, and it's on a portage, or it's around your backcountry site, and that you're seeing it. It may have lost its fear of humans, but you don't really know. So the advice that we give is stay calm and back away. Any predator, any animal, has a tolerance to how close you are to it. So don't approach it. Give it an opportunity to get away if that's what it needs. So if you do happen to stumble across one, make sure that you stay together as a group and give it a chance to move away. Aggression may work. The reason I say that is because a lot of the literature, especially in Western Canada, talks about throwing rocks and beating pans and making all sorts of noise. If that's the first time the bear has seen a human in a while, it may work. But if it's truly food conditioned, it doesn't matter how much you throw rocks at it. It's just not gonna. It doesn't care. It just doesn't work. Leave the area and then remove whatever you may have left that's attracted the bear. Some defensive bears or habituated bears will become defensive. The good thing about a defensive bear is it almost always gives you warning signs. And there are a number of different signs that it gives. It's jaw popping. It does this I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this with this mic. It's just snapping its jaw, and you can hear that. It's a popping sound. It may do this snorting, it'll swat its paw down on the ground. And the ultimate defensive behavior that it'll do is something called a bluff charge, where it runs up and it puts two paws right in front of you on the ground and pounds the ground. It doesn't make contact with you, but it's going to scare you. But it's a defensive warning. It's saying, you're too close to me for whatever reason. It's defending something, either a food source or perhaps young. So what do you do in a situation like that? Stay together again. The reason to stay together is very interesting. If you look at all of the most serious encounters in North America, and there's been about 100 or so in the last 100 years, all of the serious ones have involved one or two people. As soon as you get groups of larger than two or three or more, there's almost no serious encounters. So a group of people is a very good idea. Don't split up and run in different directions. Back away. Don't run, actually. Don't run is very important. Any predator is triggered by fast movement. The easiest way to demonstrate this is if you have a cat, which is domesticated. If you have a cat and have a laser pointer and do this on the ground, what does it do? All right, it chases it like crazy. It's just this built-in mechanism must chase that. And that's what a bear would do as well if you run. Use a whistle or bear spray. A whistle is just a loud noise that just sometimes startles a bear out of whatever it's thinking it's doing. And bear spray ultimately is, if a bear is very close, within sort of 10 feet or so, pepper spray into the nose and into the eyes as an irritant. The most serious encounter is the predatory. It's also, fortunately, the most rare thing that can happen. We only have a handful in North America, but we've had 2 in Algonquin Park, so it is real. And the most important thing I can say to you is fight back. There's, again, conflicting literature about playing dead. Fight back. Fight back is the most important thing you do, but it's incredibly rare. You know, I think black bears are one of the most amazing animals. They have this incredible life history. In order to survive in an area where there's no food for 5 months, they have the ability to find enough food, get fat, and raise the young. They are driven by food. They constantly, for 7 months, are just obsessed about trying to get fat for the winter. And therefore, if you live or camp in bear country, you have a responsibility to make sure that you do everything you can to make sure that you are not attracting bears. Thank you very much.